Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-Commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen and I am your host. And today we have a very special guest, Lloyed Lobo, who's an entrepreneur, podcast host, and community builder. He experienced the Gulf War as a young refugee in Kuwait, witnessing the strength of community in evacuating the population to safety. As the co-founder of a fintech platform, Boast.AI, he leveraged the community-led growth model to bootstrap the company to 10 million in annual recurring revenue, while also co-founding Traction, a community empowering more than 100,000 innovators through connections, content, and capital. Welcome to the podcast, Lloyd.
Thank you so much. That's quite an intro. I appreciate you. Looking forward to talking to your audience and hanging out here for some time.
Yes, likewise. And I'm super excited to talk to you, and thank you for joining us today. Really interesting to be able to talk to entrepreneurs that have touched into so many different areas. And from, reading your intro, you've definitely had a kind of a unique background, which I think, of course, has shaped you to where you are today. Before we kind of dive into the topic of today, which is going to be community-led growth, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and specifically how you got into what you're doing today?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if I was destined into entrepreneurship, but I was definitely nurtured into entrepreneurship in a very unconventional way. None of my family members were entrepreneurs, but I was exposed to certain elements that lend itself to the world of entrepreneurship, right? So if you look at entrepreneurship, what are the two most required things? Number one is taking an obscure idea to execution and impact while dealing with extreme uncertainty. Number two, it's all about communication. It's meeting people. It's evangelizing people. It's bringing people together, right? And I view those two things as being parcel of my life growing up. So I was born in Kuwait. My parents are from India. Now, they weren't educated. My dad was a farmer in India. My mom lived in the slums of Mumbai. And because they weren't educated, they couldn't move out west. So they moved to Kuwait for better prospects, as the currency translated more favorably when compared to India. Now, because they weren't wealthy and all, we didn't have like summers spent in Europe and fancy locations, etc., right? Or America. I hadn't even seen Disneyland, I think, till my late teens when I moved. Our childhood summers were spent in the slums of Mumbai, which was like 4 walls made out of a concrete blocks and an aluminum roof. Now, what was really interesting is there was no toilet in that house. And every 4 or 5 or maybe 10 homes had a TV. And my grandparents' house had a TV because my mom worked in Kuwait and she could bring back one. And what was really interesting despite that was watching TV was communal. Even if you're watching TV, everyone is getting together and hanging in and watching. Going to the bathroom is communal because you're standing in line to use the toilet. And even eating was communal. If you have a little extra, you share it with everyone. I still remember like my fondest memories as a kid when puddles would turn to ponds during the rainy season in the summer. I'd be swimming in them. And every summer when my parents would leave to Kuwait, I would like grab onto their feet and not want to leave. Fast forward a few years, Kuwait was hit by the Gulf War. And there was a time where there was no internet, there was no phone, security had lapsed in the country. I went down the building with my dad and I witnessed this marvel. Where today you see people belabor on a problem and it festers and gossip spreads over social media and it turns into new monsters. Back then, like, of course, extreme uncertainty,
Right.
countries getting bombed, and people, rather than belaboring on the issue, they're like, can we solve it? Somebody's like, I'll guard the building from this time to this
Mm-hmm.
time. Somebody else is like, I'll organize food. And somebody else is like, I'll help your displaced family members with some extra room. Others are like, hey, we'll coordinate
Mm-hmm.
and figure out maybe there's something we can house people at the school. So every building became a sub community and communicated with the next building and the next building, and word of mouth spread, turned into the
Mm-hmm.
largest grassroots evacuation movement that communicated and coordinated with embassies, with governments, and took people to safety. And that
Wow.
day, actually, reflecting back, I realized those two experiences in my childhood gave me two things. One is the joy of giving and helping others without expecting anything in return. More importantly, the joy of bringing people together and being around great companions. And number two
Mm-hmm.
is this entrepreneurial spirit, right, which we often associate with making money.
Right.
But what entrepreneurship really is, what that spirit really is how do you take an obscure idea to impact while dealing with extreme risk and uncertainty? And there's no bigger risk and uncertainty than the Gulf War.
Mm-hmm.
Few years later, we immigrated to Canada. I finished engineering, which is, a funny story on its own. I didn't finish high school. I, without the diploma, I managed to graduate with a bachelor's of engineering in software. So most people are like,
Wow.
you don't have a high school diploma. How did you get into engineering? And this is what I tell people.
Right.
Most of what I've been through in my life, I call luck. And people laugh at me. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's no such thing as luck. I'm like, there is. Luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. The ones who get lucky, they never stop flipping. They keep flipping and flipping and
Mm-hmm.
flipping, and sometimes several times a day. You're flipping risk,
Yeah.
risk, 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 risk. And one day you get lucky. Now, here's
Yeah.
the thing. How many kids would apply to university if they didn't finish high school, don't have a high school diploma? Not many, right? I
Yeah. Not
apply.
many at all.
I applied to every single university. Obviously,
Wow.
nobody took me. One
Right.
university, luck would have it, right? Luck and risk are different sides of the same coin. They said, "Hey, why don't you write the entrance exams? We're still waiting for your transcripts, but let's speed this up." So
Mm-hmm.
I went right. Unlike in the U.S., there's no SATs in Canada, so it's like it relies on the school entrance exam. So I wrote the math and English exam, and they're like, "Listen," because I'd sent them the scores pre-diploma, so like from previous semesters. So that we
Right.
need to see your high school diploma and the scores, and but you did well on these tests, so we'll let you start the semester in the interest of time, so you don't lose time. But if you
Mm-hmm.
don't supply the transcripts by the end of this month, then you can't continue. You're gonna have to unenroll, right?
Right.
I started the semester. Luck would have it, they never followed up,
Oh, wow.
and I graduated an engineering degree. So that's what I
Okay.
tell you always, like luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. Most people, they just
Yeah.
don't try, man. And if you look at it,
Right.
every major success in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's been obscure that eventually became huge, they never stopped. They just
Mm-hmm.
kept going and going. Look at Mr. Beast. He created the
Mm-hmm.
crappiest videos in the early days,
Yeah.
but nearly 10 years of creating videos, and he's an icon today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gary Vaynerchuk, I still remember I would watch his videos in 2005-6 on Wine TV. He did a program on video creation on HubSpot's inbound marketing program, which is where I learned all of
Mm-hmm.
my sales and marketing skills. He never
Mm-hmm.
stopped. He believed in
Mm-hmm.
video when nobody believed in video for business. And today he's
Yeah.
Gary V. Warren Buffett, the single
Yeah.
richest person in, I guess, investing in stocks, never
Mm-hmm.
stopped, right? Compound interest and consistency is what we call overnight success. Don't stop. Luck and risk are different sides of the same coin. Keep flipping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I graduated engineering. I was yearning this risk and uncertainty, obviously, because of the way I've lived my life, being this rebellious kid, um, community, people oriented, Gulf War refugee. So I graduated engineering, and I didn't want to go into engineering. And I applied to sales jobs, and nobody gives me a sales jobs, and luck would have it, a startup founder gives me a job cold calling. Now, most people
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't take that with an engineering background. I didn't see it beneath me. I think I was making like $25,000-$30,000 a year. I take the job cold calling. My parents freaked out. Indian parents. Our friends' kids are at Microsoft, and you finished engineering, you're cold calling. But fast forward today, everything I am is because of that skill, right? I talked about consistency.
Mhm.
The most important
Mhm.
skill, the other most important skill is communication. Everything from convincing your spouse that you're not going to bring money, to investors, to customers when you have no product, to convincing employees when you have no money, is communication. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if I want to get better at communication, and it's such a big skill from what I understood talking to other business people, then I got to put myself in a situation that'll force me to communicate day in, day out. And no better job than sales. Nobody would give me a
Right.
sales job. So I took cold calling as a gig. And I guess the first cold call I made took 4 hours to practice. And I hung up the first time they picked up the phone. And everyone
Right.
laughed. But I never stopped. I kept doing it and got
Mhm.
better and better and better. And then my progression happened is as a function of working for a founder. I got so good at cold calling because and I got good at understanding the workings of a startup. The next job was at a startup as well, and
Mhm.
there I joined in sales. And as I landed there, I realized they didn't have a repeatable, scalable product or process. So I needed to figure it out. I needed to figure out what the customers wanted, how to translate it into dev requirements, and guess what? Had to build a website and collateral and everything else. Now, the second job I took was in the States because my girlfriend was in med school there, and I went on a visa. I didn't have the liberty of quitting this job because what am I going to do? Where am I going to go home? Right? I'm going to have to
Mhm.
go right back. And I learned so much as a function of doing so many things and working alongside a founder. From there, I progressed to being a head of sales and marketing at another startup. And my my best friend from college called me to start Boast, and I jumped at the
Mhm.
opportunity because I'd like felt like a natural ceiling in a startup. I'm like, where do I go from here? Okay, so let's start our thing. And that tells you another key learning here is it's neither the destination nor the journey, it's the companions that matter the most, right? You become the average of the five people
Mhm.
you surround yourself with. As a function of working with founders, it was natural that I would eventually start a company. So that's
Yeah. Yeah.
how I progressed into entrepreneurship.
Okay, that's all quite a story, and that's yeah. I mean, thinking back to what you said as far as the risk, that you're taking versus the luck is on the same side of the coin because when you're going back to your not even have graduated from high school and then being able to you know go through college and then it just so happened they didn't ask for your transcripts and have been able to continue. I mean, I think a lot of the moral to that story just is you can't be afraid to try things. You can't be afraid to take that risk because you just never know how things are going to end up. 9 times out of 10, people are thinking, I didn't graduate from high school. There's no way I'm getting into college, and they're going to stop right there and maybe pivot, go a different direction. But you were determined and you went that you went forward and things just worked out.
A
So
lot of people
yeah,
don't
excellent
try, man.
excellent testimonial.
They psych themselves, and you know what?
Yeah,
Everything good is on the other side of risk and pain and suffering, man. You got to
yeah,
try, right? A lot of
yeah.
people don't try, and if you don't try, you don't stand out, you don't try to be different, you're just going to be status quo.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, like, people keep doing the same thing day in, day out, and they complain, but I'm like, what are you going to do about it? Just
Hmm.
do something, just give it a try, right? Like, what's the worst that's going to, your life's not going to be more miserable than it is right now if you try.
Right. Right.
It might
Exactly.
just get into something better. And like working out, right? You go to the gym.
Mhm.
If you keep lifting the same weights day in, day out, you're not going to get bigger. You're not going to get stronger. That's the reality. Your brains are
Mhm.
like that. Your life is
Yeah.
like that. Pain is the precondition for growth.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Well, excellent. Thank you for sharing that testimonial. Appreciate it. Now, kind of bringing it back to what you indicated in your, in kind of your story in the intro as being a young refugee during the Gulf War, and then just seeing how everyone just banded together as a community, got things done, were able to move on from that situation, get evacuated. They didn't even. It seems like they just pivoted immediately, and that's a huge, strong sense of community that I believe, as from what you mentioned, was just already there, was already part of the culture. And so, taking this to the entrepreneurship, for those that are, really just not familiar with community-led growth, which is I think a distinct model these days with many startups. Why do you think it's really been an increasingly popular growth model, in startups, in the whole startup ecosystem?
I don't know if it is popular more than like people are seeing companies like Notion and HubSpot and Atlassian. You see, Atlassian last year, the community came together to self organize 5,000 events. You look at like Notion,
Mm-hmm.
completely exploded. You look at HubSpot, right? You look at the number of community led businesses that are doing so well, that have long term
Yeah.
moats. And that's nothing new, right? The general theme is yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. First came the
Mm-hmm.
internet, .com company, then cloud, right? Then
Yeah.
social, then mobile, blockchain, fintech. But you know, we don't say fintech, blockchain, social, mobile, cloud, .com companies anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll never say AI company as well. Every innovation becomes a commodity eventually. But
Right.
the most enduring businesses are built on people to people connection. Until the day robots are buying from robots, the most enduring
Mm-hmm.
brands will be built on people connecting with people. And so
Yeah.
when you look at these successes, people realize, like Apple, like Tesla. And then why go in the last 20 years? Look at the 80s, right? Harley
Mm-hmm.
Davidson almost went bankrupt in the 80s. The management came
Mm-hmm.
out and rebuilt the company in the ethos of community. They went out and
Yep.
created rider clubs. Employees became riders, riders became employees. They rebuilt the company on the ethos of community. Community rescued the company, but also created movements to donate to breast cancer and autism. And it was all around the
Yeah.
camaraderie and the brotherhood of writing together and the joys of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
today, in 2023, not only this company is an iconic brand, but you can recognize a Harley fan merely by what they're wearing. In fact, as I'm promoting the book from grassroots to greatness, 13 rules to
Mm-hmm.
build iconic brands with community-led growth, I've been going to events dressing up like a Harley guy, right? Like
Okay.
boots till my knees, leather jacket, and everyone asks me, "Where's your Harley Davidson?" And I'm like,
Right. Right.
see how iconic that is. That kind
Yeah.
of iconic level is not built by technology. It's built by human to
Mm-hmm.
human connections. And when you see a company like OpenAI, there's got so much buzz around AI, like one of the most
Mm-hmm.
valuable companies, fastest growing companies. How did OpenAI come about? With the power of
Mm-hmm.
people. If people weren't giving them their data, the training data, and contributing, there would be no OpenAI. So that
Yeah.
just tells
That's very
you,
good.
right, that every like CPMs, look at it, marketing in 2023 is taking a bloodbath. CPMs are up. Generative AI has created a sea of sameness. You know now when people are copy pasting from ChatGPT. Consumers are
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
tired of seeing the same old nonsense, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
clickbait, spam, giving personal data to access crappy white papers. And they're tired and they're checking out of the old marketing. And the best brands know this. And they've been building communities. Like, if you see a Nike, they have their running club. You don't have to be a member to join a Nike running club. Wherever you are, you can meet new friends.
Mm-hmm.
That is community. Community is
Exactly.
about bringing people together. And what's interesting, Arlen, is as I was researching to write this book, talked to 1,000 people, watched all of my community content over the last 7 years, and looked at all these companies that have endured the test of time, I found something very interesting. Every obscure idea that eventually became a worldwide enduring phenomena, from
Mm-hmm.
Christianity to CrossFit, every obscure idea that became eventually a worldwide enduring phenomena had four stages in common. People listen to you or buy your product, you have an audience. When you bring that audience together to interact with one another, it becomes a community. When the community comes together to create impact towards a purpose that's far greater than your product or profit, it becomes a movement. And when
Mm-hmm.
that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals over time, it becomes a cult or a religion. If you see this, a lot of influencers today have audiences, but the key to turn an audience into a cult like brand is community. Bringing people
Yeah.
together is the first step.
That's that is the key. Now, a lot of the marketers and business owners that are listening to this, have already probably been exposed to a ton of different growth hacks. How do you grow the business? There's a million and one different, I guess you could say, hacks or growth models, rather, if you will, to propel your business to the next height. And so I think a big question is then going to be, because we're touting the advantages to community-led growth, but how does a brand actually know if the community-led growth strategy is right for them? Is it right for all businesses?
Exactly. So, the way I look at it is, number one, you got to understand if you have the DNA of giving, because a community is a labor of love, is a marathon of the heart and mind. It takes a
Mm-hmm.
long time. So you better love your customer.
Mm-hmm.
In general, if you're building a business, you need to have the passion for the customer you're serving. If you hate your customers, I don't know how long you're going to sustain, man. You're in business. I don't know. If you hate your ideal customers, how can you continue serving them? Or you gotta find somebody else who deals with them, right?
Right,
So
right.
one, you got to love them, and you want to be able to help them beyond your product or service. You care about their
Mm-hmm.
aspirations, not just the problems and your process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your profits. You have this. You draw joy from genuinely helping and giving, and I think that needs to be core to your DNA. So that's when you can even think about it, because a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times people come and ask me is like, hey, I want to build a community. Do I start a Slack group or a Facebook group? And I tell
Mm-hmm.
them, man, that's like asking me, I want to build a church, but you don't know what religion you belong to. Or I want to build a home,
Yeah.
but I don't know where I want to live. And that doesn't make sense, right? So it all starts with your customer. One, do you want to give? Do you have the DNA of giving? It starts with your values. Then
Mm-hmm.
your customer, who's
Mm-hmm.
your ideal customer? What are their aspirations? What stands in their way? What does their circle of influence look like? What is the white space? Um, where do they eat, breathe, drink, sleep? Once you understand your customer really well and the white space and
Yeah.
their pain points and aspirations, then you can start to create for them, right? Content,
Yeah.
value. Basically, you can create value for them, and then you can bring them together.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tie this together. If I share like Harley and Apple and Nike's examples, it's gonna be like too much of a platitude to sink in. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
share Boast's example, right? Boast fintech platform.
Okay.
We give companies money for research and development. We can sell to any company that's developing new products or improving existing products. There's hundreds of billions of dollars in government tax credits for businesses, but it's a cumbersome
Mm-hmm.
process that's prone to frustrating audits and takes a long time to get the money. We automate that. Now, when we
Mm-hmm.
started the company in 2012, we naturally gravitated to what we knew, cold calling. So we started cold calling.
Okay.
When you're cold calling, who are you going to call? Stable companies, right? You're starting out. Call oil and gas, manufacturing, construction. Nobody would take our calls. They'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, what the hell is this? You're going to take our sensitive data, which is our product development data and our financial data, and you're going to give us some money, and you're two like guys we've never heard of. Number one. Then
Mm-hmm.
we started getting dejected. And even if those people heard about these programs, they're like, why don't we just work with a big accounting firm? But we're like, the accounting firm sucks because they're
Mm-hmm.
going to do it manually and take up all your time, and we'll streamline this process. They didn't care. Credibility was a huge factor. Then we said, hey, let's go to their events. Let's storm their events, and maybe we'll make some relationships in person. We just couldn't relate. They were like the old
Mm-hmm.
cigar club, and we looked like two young guys that threw a hoodie on top of our, or rather, two young guys that threw a suit jacket on top of our hoodies. So dejected, we started
Okay.
going to the startup events, and it felt like our
Yeah.
tribe. Wow, we had great conversations. One thing led to the other. We're having dinners and lunches with these people. We're partying together. We
Mm-hmm.
are participating in hackathons together. Through that, we
Mm-hmm.
found two white spaces, which helped us build the
Mm-hmm.
first community, which is more than just subscribers, but it is building stronger, deeper connections. The one
Mm-hmm.
white space we found was all the events for startups at the time were high level CEO platitudes. Bring like a CEO with 50 million value or ARR or whatever, like some big company CEO, to
Mm-hmm.
share inspirational stories to founders. Now, if I've already quit my job and put everything on the line to do a company, and I'm at 0 or 1, and I want to get to like 1 or 5, why do I care about inspiration? How much inspiration can I soak in? I've already
Yeah.
decided to make the leap. I need tactics, not inspiration. So that was white
Yeah.
space number one.
Yeah.
White space number two was the local
Hmm.
media wasn't covering startups. So we said, aha, this is great. So we decided to host our own meetups and we served the immediate needs. See, what was happening was all those events were held by event organizers and they wanted to sell tickets. So they would bring the most popular speaker who could talk about inspiration and put butts in seats.
Hmm.
But and the startup market was very small, so people are not catering to that, and they're catering more to mainstream. So we started hosting like small events, 5 10 like 10 15 people, bring a speaker who's like got to 5 million 10 million to talk about specifically
Hmm.
how they got their first 100K in revenue, how they got their first 100K in funding, their first employees, yada yada, very tactical. And we did it with a
Yeah.
cadence. We never stopped. Like, just because 10 people showed up and we had free pizza and free meetup space at the co-working space, just kept doing it and
Hmm.
doing it. And that grew. And one day,
Yeah.
like 200 people showed up to the co-working space and they're like, you can't do this
Hmm.
here anymore. You got to leave.
Yeah.
Right. And then in parallel, reached out to the local media and said, can we cover startups? And they're like, listen, it's not a priority. So I went
Hmm.
in to some like second tier, not national media blog, and I said, can I cover a local event? They loved the content. They're like, we just need content. So I covered some
Hmm.
startups because I couldn't talk about like how to build a startup. So I covered a couple of startups and I shared it with those startups, and those posts went viral, got lots of tweets. So I went back to the newspaper because I knew that the newspaper was affiliated with it was a part of the national newspaper. So I'm like, I have a website that has no traffic. What's the best way to drive SEO for a new website? You get like domain authority from, backlinks from a high traffic website, like the newspaper, highest domain authority. You'll
Hmm.
get instant social proof because now you're a writer for the newspaper. And oh, they're two new guys that gets washed away when you have the newspaper and all these awesome speakers coming to your events, right? It's like
Yeah.
the credibility bounces off each other. Oh, columnist for the newspaper, oh, speaker at the event, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I shared the blog with the editor, and the editor is like, "Oh wow, this is greatly trafficked." And I'm like, "We could bring the same traffic to your blog, and the newspaper is a dying medium for the younger generation, so you could liven it up, right?
Hmm.
Tap into a new audience." So he said, "Sure, like this is great. I'll give you a blog." And one lesson
Hmm.
here is, unless you're doing something illegal, never ask for permission, beg for
Hmm.
forgiveness, because your life will go in asking for permission. So I'm like, what do I call this blog? What do I call this blog post? He gave me one blog post. I decided to call it Startup of the Week. Now, I did two things.
Hmm.
One, in a place which the media wasn't really covering, you get the national newspaper calling it Startup of the Week. They're like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, this is like an award kind of thing, social proof for them.
Right.
Two, it gave us instant credibility.
Hmm.
Three, some weird thing like every so often, every Monday morning, the founder would go to the newsstand and buy the print copy, right?
Hmm.
Because being in print is more legit. And so it gave us
Right.
more
Yeah.
credibility. And then we got a backlink every week, which
Okay.
boosted our domain authority every week. Startup of the Week written by Boast, Lloyd Lobo,
Hmm.
co-founder of Boast. And what's really interesting is when he gave me that first blog, it was one blog post. I didn't
Hmm.
know any of this other thing would happen. And I wrote Startup of the Week, shared it with the founder, and it went more viral than that first post I wrote for a second tier blog. And the editor calls me, and I have missed calls, and I'm like, he's going to be pissed that I called it Startup of the Week. But he
Hmm.
called me and he was happy, and he's like, listen, if you commit to writing it every week, I will give you a print column. And I wasn't getting paid. So I wrote that
Hmm.
with cadence. So a few lessons that come out of here is one, understanding your ideal customer. Two, going after a market that you can resonate with and vibe with because it's a long journey to spend
Yep.
time with them and you genuinely want to give. Three,
Hmm.
pick an offline medium and pick an online medium and let them play off each other. So our
Yeah.
offline medium was a meetup. I'd rather do small meetups more frequently through the year than one annual
Hmm.
conference. And even
Hmm.
when during the pandemic we moved all of this online,
Okay.
rather than doing one big virtual summit, we were doing two live like webinars, sessions
Hmm.
like this, but the audience would
Yeah.
join and interact with one another, two live a week.
Okay.
And that cadence of doing that took our audience to over 100,000 subscribers.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
the point I'm trying to make is pick an offline medium and pick an online medium.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever you do, pick a medium that allows you to own the audience. I feel fortunate we were at a time where social platforms weren't buzzing as much. Like LinkedIn wasn't huge, podcasting wasn't huge. And so we
Yeah.
were forced to do events and blog for a newspaper, which enabled me to collect email addresses. Now, when you use social platforms, you can't collect email addresses, right? So if
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
collect email addresses, how do you bring people together? You just hope
Mm-hmm.
that they'd sign up from your social. Now, when you go on your LinkedIn feed, how many things do you see?
Yeah.
So then you're not focused, and it's the
Exactly.
attention is very divided. So we're very
Yeah.
fortunate. And so what that newspaper article every week did was we put a form in there. If you want to be in here, apply. People would
Mm-hmm.
apply. Our list started growing, and then we would invite them to our meetups. They'd come to
Mm-hmm.
meetups, meet other people, and that combo of a regular cadenced online channel, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
blog, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a live webinar, in combination with a regular in-person meetup bringing people together, helped us build and grow that community. And then during the pandemic, we added, we moved it all online, so now it's 2 live webinars a week, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just more and more people are showing up, and it's growing.
Yeah.
And so that's the trick, right? Like, you don't have to do
Yeah.
100 things. Like, figure out your
Right.
ideal customer, figure out their circle of influence, meaning who do they follow, so you have a list of people to invite to your events, what platforms do they frequent, so you know where to distribute, and who do they
Mm-hmm.
fund, who are the people they pay and buy other services from, so you can partner with them. And
Yeah.
all our salespeople then stopped being seen as salespeople, but they were out there going in the community, helping people, shaking hands, kissing babies, having conversations, saying, how can I help you? Right? Okay, you may or
Yeah.
may not need the service, but is there anything I can help you with or make a connection for? So they
Yeah.
became like essentially more community builders than
Right.
BD people, salespeople.
Yeah.
So that is
Definitely.
the brass tacks of how we did it. I mean, a very quick summary.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. Like you said, when your people are seen as not necessarily a salesperson, they're there to try to help you. You're trying to engage with them, you're trying to solve their problems, and you're really trying to really be a friend or an advocate to getting them to grow. And then another key point that you made that I think is very true is that you guys kind of at that time you reached out to kind of an underserved market. There were people that were fresh startup founders that were, maybe they left some large Fortune 500 companies. They didn't need the motivation. They were making big salaries, but they needed actionable tips to move their brand forward. But they weren't looking for the motivation, and you guys came in and served them with a group that talked about, like you said, brass tacks. How do you get things done? What are some actionable steps and tips? And that's what you have to do. You're looking to serve them with actionable items. And so, yeah, I think that's a testament to when you're looking to build a community. Of course, there's tons of communities out there, but what are some underserved? What are some communities that may already exist, but their needs are kind of not met? And how can you, as a brand, meet their needs by creating another community? And I think that's really one of the things
That's
you want to
key.
look
A
at.
lot of us niche up, right? Then we niche
Yeah.
up. I think it's important to niche down, like go like, one level lower and lower, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
better to be an inch wide and a mile deep than a mile
Mm-hmm.
wide and an inch deep, right? You want to
Yeah,
get
exactly.
really, really, really be the best of the smallest thing, and then expand and then
Yep.
expand, because
Yeah, that's
markets are massive now, right? If you be
mhm,
the best at something, and this is what e-commerce entrepreneurs I think do really well, is
mhm.
a lot of them, they sell these niche products which they can really build a community around. So online combined with offline, I mean,
Yep,
look at what Red Bull did, right? I mean, that's kind of
yep,
where they started, with universities and colleges. But
yeah, exactly.
as you're thinking about communities, I want you to think about this. The one step I didn't mention, and there are 13 steps in the book, which will take you from audience to cult. But nonetheless, the one step that I didn't mention is, in the early days when you're thinking about community, there's one of three kind of communities you can build. One is a
Hmm.
community of practice. Okay, a
Yep,
community of practice is learning about a specific field, like how do I get better at a specific skill, etc. Then there's a community of product, right? Traction is a community of practice. We teach you how to become better entrepreneurs, better innovators. HubSpot, become better marketers. Then there's a community of product, which is making you, turning your product users, turning your customers into evangelists. Like, how do you use the
Mm-hmm.
product? How you build on the product?
Yep.
How do you become an advocate? And the third one is a community of play where you come together to have fun, more like Harley Davidson or Nike Running Club.
Mm-hmm.
You got to
Exactly.
pick what kind of community you'd build.
Mm-hmm.
I'll only urge you, if you don't have a product that people use very frequently, or you have a new product that doesn't have product market fit,
Mm-hmm.
don't try to make your community about the product.
Yeah.
Make it about a practice where people can learn to get better, or make it about
Mm-hmm.
play. Like Red Bull was the community of play, right? It was a
Yeah.
fun. And then you have Red Bull as a function of it, kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's a very, very well said and true indeed. Well, Lloyd, as we get ready to wrap things up, aside from Red Bull, of course, is a great example. You also mentioned that your brand Boast.AI, that have led some great community-led efforts and grew that way. What are some other brands that you can think of that have done some exceptional community-led growth and have been able to propel your brand that we can kind of look at as a model?
Definitely Notion. Notion's a great one.
Okay. Yeah.
Notion's fantastic. I write about these on my LinkedIn, right? So you can
Okay.
follow me on Lloyd Lobo on LinkedIn for business content,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll continue to maybe feature one community every week at least,
Okay.
and one community led business and how they did it. But
That'll be great.
Notion's a great example. If you look at
Mm-hmm.
Barbie, it's an iconic brand, but they built a
Yeah.
massive community, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
movie is everything what people talk about. Look at Lululemon.
Right.
Look at
Yeah.
CrossFit is a great
Yeah.
example around the rituals of workout of the
Mm-hmm.
day. So there are a
Yeah.
lot of these that you can take inspiration from, Gymshark, that kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to figure out, but it all starts with your customers' aspirations. I can't say
Yeah.
this enough. It starts with your customers' aspirations, and without that, there's nothing. Like, I mean, look at Minecraft. There are so
Yeah.
many, right?
Yeah, they're very true. Yeah, thank you for naming those. And those are some great models that we can all try to follow. Well, Lloyd, this has been an awesome conversation. I definitely appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot as far as community building, and I know there's some great takeaways for all of our viewers and listeners for sure. But I always like to switch gears here before we close things out, just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. So, yeah, if you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself, that you think we'd be interested to know.
Fun fact about myself, I don't know what's so fun about it, but I'll tell you, all my life I chased success looking for happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found success, which is other people's definition of success, which is money, we sold half the company, came into some money, and I left the
Mm-hmm.
day to day of the company. I ended up depressed and I hit
Mm-hmm.
rock bottom. And eventually I joined a fitness community. I came back to good health, which
Mm-hmm.
actually propelled me on the subject of the book, which is community. And as I reflected back, from spending my childhood summers in the slums of Mumbai to being a refugee of the Gulf War, to learning everything about marketing from the HubSpot community, to bootstrapping Boast with community, the whole life was surrounded by community. The
Yeah.
one time where I came, and I was piss poor. The one time I
Mm-hmm.
came into money was when I felt I was going to lose my community because I left the day to day of the business.
Okay.
And then
Wow.
what brought me back to good health was community. Loneliness is the number one killer in America. There are 5
Mhm.
places in the world where people live functionally towards 100. Functionally is key
Mhm.
because longevity without functionality is useless. And they're called the
Mhm.
blue zones.
Mhm.
4 or 5 out of the 9 traits have to do with social connections and community. And that's why I decided
Mhm.
to write the book about the community, to educate the world that whether it's business or personal life, it's never the destination or the journey, but it's the companions that matter the most. Right? 2 key incidents here on the Gulf War. During the Gulf War, as we were going from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan on the highway of death in this rickety bus,
Mhm.
currency invalid, bombings, etc. Adults should have been scared and worried, right? I'm a 9 year
Yeah,
old or so. I
for
look
sure.
around the bus, people are laughing and singing and playing the guitar. You could be on a
Mm.
crappy journey on the way to hell. Great friends make it memorable. Great companions make it memorable.
Yeah.
Another incident is when I came into money, I got COVID, Omicron. I almost died. I was hospitalized on oxygen.
Mhm.
Because it was Omicron, even my wife wasn't allowed to see me. And I freaked out. I'm like, man, what good is all this money? I'm going to die a lonely death.
Mhm.
Um, it's not the money in your bank, it's the people around your tombstone that matter. What brings
Yeah.
you happiness is companionship. I'm not saying money is bad. Money is good so long as you
Mhm.
use it to buy something else. And that something else
Right.
is experiences with people, it's companionship, it is freedom. Freedom to do
Mm,
what you want, where you want, with whom you want, when you want, in your time, in your prime. If you
yeah.
keep chasing, it's never going to be enough. And one day you realize, what did I spend? What good is all of this if I don't have the energy or the functionality to enjoy it? So I'll leave
Yeah.
you with that. The
For
book's
sure.
on
For sure.
from grassroots to greatness.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's very well said, Lloyd. I appreciate you sharing that. And aside from the book, if anybody else wants to connect with you, what are some of the best ways for our listeners to connect?
LinkedIn is the best way. I'm on.
Okay.
I don't like being on multiple platforms, and so LinkedIn is the best way. Lloyd, Lloyed Lobo, and I'm that on LinkedIn.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Well, that's great. We really appreciate you coming on, Lloyd. It was an awesome conversation, and thank you for joining us today on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, you too.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.